economic and political crisis?
Look, I mean, first, let's acknowledge the fact that this kind of a disaster transcends local politics, even to a certain extent, regional geopolitical rivalries in the short term. But what it doesn't do is to change reality when it comes to foreign direct investment coming into the country. Turkey is a large country, it's a geostrategically very important country, and it deserves at some stage to attract the kind of long-term sticky capital that countries of this scale requires. Now, given that we are in an election cycle, it's our centenary year, you know, it will be most likely one of the most consequential elections in Turkish history. Investors are waiting on the sidelines trying to understand how the next phase of Turkey's governance will look post-May 14th.
Exactly. Is this going to be a post-Erdogan country? And if so, how does that change your strategy?
Look, I mean, whether it's post-Erdogan or let's continue with the same kind of theme, no one knows at the moment. But what investors will look for, rightly so, is the propensity of the country to be able to instigate credible reforms.
Something that they have consistently failed to do.
For the past decade or so, yes. I mean, if you go back to how the first part of the 2000s were, Turkey was a rising star in Europe, and then that kind of lost its credibility factor a little bit over the past, I would say, a decade or so. Now, if we can step and segue back into Turkey being able to do credible reforms, and I'm talking about fiscal, monetary policy, market reforms, investors are waiting on the sidelines, funds are waiting to be able to have the opportunity to be able to invest into the country. But we all know, as fund managers, as business owners, that we are in the business of managing risk. But we have to be able to price that risk to be able to manage it appropriately. And at the moment, as it stands, it's very difficult to be able to price Turkish risk for the moment.
Yeah, and just the risk, frankly, politically to President Erdogan as a result of this crisis. I mean, this has hit his base, essentially, the people who have consistently elected him over 20 years.
Sure.
How difficult in your mind is it going to be for him to keep that kind of credibility with voters?
Look, I mean, I think before this disaster struck Turkey, we had been dealing and are dealing with inflation issues. People are getting poorer. Now, that's a global thematic, by the way. Middle classes are getting poorer. Poor people are getting even more poorer. But you're right. I mean, his demographics are normally the
heartland of Anatolia.
The heartland of Anatolia, right? Now, what this will do is difficult to tell because we are just live in this situation. It is a humanitarian issue. As I said before, this transcends local politics in the short term. But the reaction of the government in handling this crisis is going to be a significant, I think, factor in seeing how the voter base views them. But this will not make the core fundamental economic issues go away from today to tomorrow. I think 4 months is a long time in politics anywhere in the world. And given the kind of geopolitical context that we are all having to go through globally, and Turkey's relative importance in being an actor in that climate will also be determinant. And we'll all kind of see and find out over the next 4 months.
But has it made you nervous at all to watch President Erdogan's actions as a foreign player, if you will? And I'm talking about as a NATO member with such a close relationship with the Russians. Now, that has raised eyebrows across the West, and it's something that, although it's benefited Ukraine in terms of those kind of conversations, being able to grease the wheels, etc., at the same time, we're talking about a nation that buys weapons from the Russians, and at the same time is looking to put in major energy infrastructure.
Look, let's take a step back and understand. I mean, the importance of NATO has become, again, kind of in the headlines. And Turkey has been a staunch partner, an ally, a NATO member, second largest army in NATO, one of the largest contributors. So I don't think this shifts Turkey's kind of involvement in NATO. However, we live in very interesting times, like the ancient Chinese curse, right? I mean, ever since the end of World War II, ever since the setup of the global liberal world order, which we have all been a part of, things are changing. We live in an era of proxy wars, and what we are seeing in Ukraine right now and how the whole world is reacting requires credible mediators in between to be able to facilitate transactions. Now, that's the dry facts. Now, how does it make me nervous? I mean, the whole geography makes me nervous, frankly, because if you look at how the whole Russian invasion of Ukraine has shifted Europeans' energy dependence on Russia, what that means, what countries like Turkey will have to do to be able to provide a credible bridge between Europe and East, I mean, yeah, I am nervous. But again, there are so many unknowns. About the weapons part, again, buying weapons from Russia is a contagious subject. At the same time, Turkey does sell weapons to Ukraine. So it's an interesting dynamic going on, and I mean, it is not an easy place to sit in the middle of a growing world conflict. Cooler heads have to prevail, should prevail, and we have to kind of see if they will.
The enemy of my friend, not necessarily my enemy. Ozan, it's always great to have you. Thanks so much for joining us on CNBC. Jumana, I'm going to hand this back over to you.